We appreciate everybody joining us this morning to talk about CoPilot. Today, you've got myself, Keegan, and then Scott, our Director of Business Development, joining. We'll get into intros here in a second. As always, we value education and simplicity. So really our goal and takeaways for today are to cover CoPilot at a high level, some of the stuff, how to get started, and then ideally we'll kind of wrap up with more of the how to prompt and how to look at it. So with that, we'll get going. So my name's Keegan. CoPilot here made this really great image of me on the left. I don't know if it was Scott really trying to get some brownie points with me or what, but this is kind of an example of where AI still needs some help. So again, my name's Keegan Bolstead, Sales Manager with Ontech Systems. Scott, I'll kick it over to you quick to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Scott Nielsen, Director of Business Development over here at Ontech. A little bit of backstory behind this slide. Keegan, Ben Affleck called. I think he found his long lost brother. But we purposely use this slide to show that, even though there's a lot of talk of AI going on in this space and people have a lot of questions about it, it still needs human involvement. So as you can see, there are definitely some things that, we would want you to guide it to do in order to be effective, right? Like some of those typos in there, AI is not perfect. It still needs those people to be involved. But we look forward to diving into this topic with you guys.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. These are generated with the CoPilot free version. So what we did here is, Scott, if I remember right, this was based off our LinkedIn profiles we gave it, if I remember right. Yeah.
Yes.
So again, prompting, we'll cover that. That's a really important topic to get what you want out of generative AI and things like CoPilot. Quick update on agenda for today. We're going to kind of cover what is CoPilot, why should I care? Scott's going to dive into some use cases for us. I'll kind of cover some getting started best practices, and then we'll look at some prompting guides. Similar here on the right, just so you guys can see, we've got another AI generated image. One of the things that sticks out to me right away is obviously pilot is misspelled. The prompt that we gave the generative AI for this circumstance was take the CoPilot logo and put a lock symbol around it. We were trying to make like a security play on that. But unfortunately, in terms of our prompting skills, this was that end result that we got. We're going to talk about why prompting, again, is just so important to the use of AI. So CoPilot, what is it? Why should I care? We've got a lot of plays in terms of where CoPilot specifically can fit, or that generative AI paired with like a large language model that accesses your data. We're not going to spend a ton of time in this section on the use cases. This is more of like why it's used. The broken meetings is a really common piece. It's really about empowering that employee. If they can't join a meeting, can I get updates? Do I not even need to join the whole meeting? But those employees are really looking for help in terms of meetings. That second key piece that employees are looking for is they're spending time searching for information. And that time equals productivity, that time equals output that they can't do because they're spending time trying to track and find the data that they need. Heavy email user, they're going to spend almost a full work week in email, but simply having AI write messages for you. Again, we'd still recommend proofreading, but that's another key area. And then the creative side of it, that's kind of that third play where we're seeing generative AI specifically be extremely helpful. Most of our presentation today is built off of Microsoft slide decks or CoPilot outlined pieces. So having the ability to focus and then using this to also inspire or create, be creative. And that's really those three core tenets to CoPilot. It's unleashing creativity, providing good productivity and then up leveling skills. You have something as an example, if we go back to that first that image of that logo that we were trying to make, I could not do that. Even though I use a Mac, people always make fun of me for, oh, don't you have the design programs? I definitely could not make that image. Think of when you were 6 years old and you were working in Microsoft Paint and stuff like that. That would be my skill level in terms of generating, an image and the quality that could be obtained. So up leveling my skills is something where this plays a lot. There's kind of two sides to Microsoft's AI services that we kind of wanted to talk about. Some don't really know, but Microsoft did invest in OpenAI back in 2019, 2020. So they do have some OpenAI, which is what like ChatGPT and those types of services are built off of. And then CoPilot is really specifically built to work within the Microsoft 365 tenant and the other apps and data that you can tag along with that. So if you think about it, where CoPilot, what we're talking about today, it's really about tying into data within your Office 365, tying into data that sits within your Windows environment, and then Dynamics or some of those pieces if you're using Microsoft like ERP or CRM platform functions. That's definitely where you see the largest gain in value is the more involved you are with the Microsoft suite, the more pieces that you can tag and associate with it. I will turn it over to Scott here quick.
Yeah, thanks, Keegan. So going into use cases for your peers, a lot of this data that we're going to dive into was gathered by a company called Channelnomics. What they do is they take surveys of SMBs across the tech space and get in or produce these graphs like this and these visuals to show you what everyone is leaning towards. So one of the things that we saw from these survey results and from the data was that machine learning and predictive analytics, right? Those are leading the way, especially in most of the regions here. As you can see, it's broken down by, global, APAC, Europe, and North America. So it definitely says that, small to medium-sized businesses want to leverage AI and think about the future, right? They know that they need to leverage it to be competitive, and they know that they need to leverage it to complement the human employee. So I thought that was a very informative slide there. But on this next slide, reasons why small to medium-sized businesses haven't adopted AI. What I found very, very interesting was if you look at kind of the global and the North American attitude towards it, they're still exploring what AI can do, right? And so what you can infer from the data here is they need more guidance and more assistance on information of how to best use AI to complement their human workforce. And it's also interesting because, hiring talent isn't very up there, and neither is, cost. So, what you can think about is how are you teaching your own people how to best leverage AI, right? It's here to complement that human piece. So imagine going into like a bakery, right? And there are 12 different flavors of donuts and it's overcomplicated. Small to medium-sized businesses are looking for people to help them best make the right decisions when it comes to using AI. And again, helping their current people leverage it. So some interesting things which kind of coincide with the previous slide are buying trends for SMBs and how they plan to buy and reasons they're investing in AI. A lot of it is just long term, right? They're thinking ahead. I know there's a saying in tech, like if you're talking about it currently when it's all the rage, you're probably a little bit late. But you can definitely tell that the future piece is there, and then the complement to the human workforce is there. I think we're at the point to where we're starting to see ROI from investments, but further down the road, I think that's just going to be greater exemplified. So. Anticipated outcomes of AI adoption. I thought this was very, very interesting because the top one across the board was just responding better to market demands for the most part. Another one was reducing operating costs, right? AI can be used as a personal assistant to pull data from different sources, especially when it's involved within the Microsoft ecosystem. But the reoccurring theme that I will hit on the head is that it's here to complement the human workforce, right? It's not here to necessarily replace people, but it's here to make us more efficient and free up space for more creative ventures or focusing on other areas of the business that we want to focus on. And then going into some use cases for Microsoft. Microsoft really likes to define where these use cases can be, and they like to group them out like in terms of, business segments, right? So if I were in marketing and I wanted to have CoPilot save me some time and pull together a list of created leads, what CoPilot can do is if it's linked and synced up to the rest of the Microsoft ecosystem, it will pull data from everything. So like Word, Excel, forms,
Even Dynamics.
Dynamics, and get you that list of leads, right? And get you that list of leads that you would have to like search through different clicks for. So it's definitely there to save you time and help you be more efficient. So the top 10 things to try with AI, here are a list of these. I personally like using AI to summarize my meetings. It's kind of like when you are back in elementary school, right? And we all had that exercise of what is the main idea of this paragraph. Copilot does a pretty good job of extrapolating the data and showing you and showing you, what the main idea is. If you want ideas for writing a paper or translating something, Copilot's an easy way to save you a bunch of time around those too. Some skill scenario examples, right? You saw what we had on the intro slide and you saw the logo that we had created, right? You can use Copilot to really help launch your creativity. The other thing is asking, what a coworker or team member's been working on, right? The AI links to everything in the Microsoft ecosystem when Copilot is involved. So if you have a coworker who's working on a report for a client, you can ask Copilot, right? What's this coworker been doing? Can I get a status update from it? And then you can share the data that way. Another way is to just analyze a complex report. If you have like a bar graph, like in the previous slides, Copilot will definitely give you a summary of what the data is showing and what trends it is looking to see.
Yeah, great. I do see a question here from Anthony that we will get to in a second about the security concerns surrounding Copilot and some of the walling. So Anthony, sit tight. We'll get to that here in just a couple slides.
Yeah. And another set of just creativity examples for you guys. If you want to review benefits, right? If you're handed a packet of something and you just want the meat and potatoes of it, you can tell it to summarize, what you want to see. So that will save you from rifling through a lot. It's good to bounce ideas off of writing drafts for things. What I would really recommend is just proofreading and giving your own input, right? We're asking AI and we'll get into prompts later, but I like to use the analogy of if there's a child and it's like, hey, go draw, right? The child might grab a crayon and draw on the wall, right? So as we get into prompting, we'll cover giving it more specific instructions. So that way there is not a bunch of crayon or marker on the wall, so to speak. And then more productivity scenario examples, right? You can create a table of pros and cons. You can respond to a customer's email in Outlook with a different tone. And all of these will go back to prompting. One thing that I have done before is actually create a SWOT analysis that's going to help with the strengths and weakness of a business function. And it gives a pretty insightful write-up on how to do that. So just something to think about as you explore Copilot further. Yep.
And I was just say, you want me to start to take back over, Scott?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, the scenario library. This is one of I'd say the bigger pieces to check out as you begin exploring what could I use Copilot for, or how can I justify the purchase, the cost of it. This really kind of shows some different scenarios, what you need in terms of data and connectivity requirements. But it really covers a lot of the scenarios that we ran through here today in a significantly deeper level. Like if you want to see it simulated of how it's doing it, the Copilot scenario library is a really good resource for that. And now we get to Anthony's question in the chat. Are there security concerns surrounding AI? And Microsoft has been pretty transparent about the security practices of it. Kind of the highlight that they lay out of how you should go about rolling out Copilot. The first is leadership kind of has to be on board. You need an executive sponsor. You've got to kind of understand what's the prioritization of what we're trying to tackle. Human change I'm going to cover last, because then it really goes to that technical readiness. So to Anthony's question, I'm going to bounce to 2 slides and then we'll come back. There is an optimization assessment that you can run for Copilot that specifically looks at the security controls that you have in place within your Office 365 tenant and how you can wall off data. This is the biggest area where Copilot can be, harmful isn't the right term, but users can get access to data sets that they shouldn't because it's not permission to disallow them to get there. So the pros and cons of connecting AI to your data sets is if a user runs a query or a command and that wall isn't there to prevent them from going and getting a financial data set or a management or leadership data set, they're going to be able to pull and retrieve that data through the AI. So that really stresses that technical readiness check of going through those and looking at those kind of the walling that you have today and how you want to improve that. And then to bounce back quick, the human change is the other biggest driver for success or failure with what we've seen with deployments. Even within some of Ontech's own usage of Copilot here over the last 3 to 6 months, users get out of it what they're willing to put in and invest to learn and get good at prompting. It really comes down to how effective they can be. And so enablement, as you start talking about deploying Copilot, becomes really, really important. So yeah, making sure that people are both on board. And this really comes down to the other factor that Scott's kind of alluded to quite a bit, but I want to reinforce. When we approach users about AI, we don't want them to think that it's going to take their job, replace them as an employee. That's kind of like a killer right away to get buy-in for the platform, is if they kind of view, oh, you're using this to kind of take away my job or get rid of me. It's going to be an uphill battle to get that adoption and that usage. So what we've seen for best success is kind of like an AI council that kind of meets of leadership, some department heads, and some end users, as well as your technology people, to really come up with what are we trying to accomplish, and then break it into smaller chunks. And that's really kind of what that Microsoft view of a rollout looks like, is getting that readiness checklist done, identifying some of those scenarios that we want to tackle, making sure the security around those is ready, and then that gets us into actually starting that Copilot rollout and full implementation. The skills that are kind of needed. This somewhat goes to the security of it, but also comes down to, as people change, as you replace people, how do you make this easy to learn? Our experience has been peer-to-peer learning is like the best way to get people to use this. So like Ontech as an example, it wasn't until a couple of us on the leadership team really started to like highlight, hey, I used CoPilot to do this, I used CoPilot to do that, before we really started to see staff actually willing to look at it, play with it, use it. Um, Not everybody is going to generate or get to like an advanced skill set that's going to be able to deliver like organizational wide value. You really start small and look at that individual value. So, to Scott's point, a lot of what he covered with use cases, how can I make my job easier? How can I take things that I'm either not good at doing or don't like to do and make them done quicker and better and more effective potentially with the use of Copilot? That departmental value is when you really start getting into more of the Power Automate and the workflowing stuff that Copilot can do. So as an example, Copilot can help you build workflows within Office 365. And that's where you see like department leader or leadership level people start to see more value outside of just the generative AI component. Talks about the optimization assessment. This is pretty easy to go through. Like I said, we are going to email out the slides. And part of the slide deck has the success kit that this optimization assessment's in. We've gone through this with a couple customers already. So if this is something that you're struggling with, you don't know how to go through it, feel free to reach out to your account management team if you're on the existing customer side. Your account managers can easily help walk you through this. If you're more of a prospect or somebody not doing business with us, we are looking at coming out with more of a workshop with this. That's something that I'm looking at hopefully in early 2025 would be to do more Copilot like workshops where we've got hands-on use cases with an organization in a demo tenant. So if that's something of interest, feel free to grab my info, shoot me a message. We're really looking at building out more of a workshop format. Planning checklist. This is a Microsoft document, but it really is kind of that framework that you can use as you talk about starting that AI journey, both in terms of identifying team members, and then also really getting into how do we train people. A lot of it comes down to you don't buy licenses or do that until quite a bit later into the process. It's going to take some time to get there. Adoption success. This is one thing that we threw this slide in here, not necessarily to spend a ton of time on it, but more of the push-pull battle we had within Ontech is Copilot launched in terms of how can we justify both the adoption of it, but then also justify the cost, the expense of it. You've kind of heard me reference for the most part, we still use most of our users are still on free licenses of it. And the reason is just the consumption has not been high enough to warrant the actual purchase of the licenses and how much of our tenant we do want exposed to AI. But that adoption success is really going to come down to can you get users through the initial change phase and get them to really execute meaningful pieces that help with their day-to-day work. This is just a different way to view that overview. These would be things, the reason why we've got them in the deck is if you're more of a champion of AI within your organization and you kind of want some information to be able to take to your leadership team, these are good slides to kind of take and talk about how do we look at this deployment, where do we go? And then again, another resource page, but training and documentation, that's the one thing I would say Microsoft actually has done really well with the Copilot launch is between the lab stuff that's out there, the workshop pieces they have, the amount of like YouTube and other type of content they've put out there does make skilling a little bit easier. There is going to be a heavier burden on the technical side as you get started. But once it gets going, it really turns into enabling those users and making sure those end users are confident, prepared, and ready to go. Prompting. So this is something that we wanted to add in here and cover. I do want to try to leave some time for some additional Q&A. So I'll try to wrap this up in maybe 5 minutes or so to leave us about 10 minutes before we break. But Scott alluded to it in the beginning in terms of like for those that have children, you definitely can understand the analogy of if you don't provide good direction, the results you get is kind of that lack of direction that you didn't provide. So another good example that I've seen, if anybody's ever built a house, but hey, I go to a builder and I tell a builder, I want a house, design me a house, and that's all the instruction that I give them. And then the plans that they send back are a micro house, like one of those tiny houses. And it's like, well, hey, that's not what I wanted. That's not really the fault of the designer. That's the fault of the prompting that was used to try to get the derived result. So, what should be said, if I'm talking to that house builder is, hey, I want a 2-story house. I want it north facing. I really like natural light. So I want a lot of windows. I want sunlights on the roof. I'd like it to have a fence on the yard. I'd like this. I'd like that. The more data that we can feed that prompt, the better that derived result is going to be. So, start off by really telling CoPilot what you need. I want to learn, edit this text, transform this, write this, but be very specific in terms of what you're telling CoPilot you need. And then really look at the context, source, and expectations. So I think Microsoft, this is again where they did a really good job kind of talking about how you break down that prompt. So goal, what do I want out of it? What am I looking for? Context, why do you need it? Who's involved? Source, so look at emails and chats, look at this document, look at this attached file, whatever that circumstance is, what are you asking CoPilot to sample from? And then how should CoPilot respond to meet those expectations? So terms like simple language or technical language, those things will matter in terms of how CoPilot responds to you. Scott, do you have anything to add on that slide?
I just think it really goes back to adding as much detail as possible, right? And just giving good direction. You can't expect CoPilot to write a perfect presentation for you off the bat. It still needs us to be effective, right? And I think I can't hammer that in enough. CoPilot's here to make us more efficient. It's not here to do things on its own. So
there's some really good YouTube and other video pages out there within Microsoft's published stuff that I think are really helpful as you start talking with staff about Copilot and prompting. This is the biggest area that we've seen in terms of end user misunderstanding is they get down kind of a hole of they think they're explaining it really well and it makes sense to them, but it doesn't necessarily make sense in terms of the language that Copilot potentially understands. So in terms of after you prompt it that first time and then you don't get the result you need or want, it's important that you can go back and tell it, hey, do this again, try this again, change this, do that. It's going to be pretty rare that you get your exact wanted output on the first prompt. It's going to take a little bit of going back and forth to generate that content, especially images. Scott, I think you'd probably agree with me. That's where we saw the biggest struggle in terms of identifying the creativeness that we wanted it to use, because neither of us are super creative people. So in trying, that first image, Copilot and a lock symbol, that's all we were telling it that we wanted. We weren't really defining specifically what we were wanting it to look like, the color schemas that we wanted it to use. It was one of those things of that was an us issue more than it was a Copilot issue. And then Copilot Lab. This is the last resource that I wanted to mention. I know we've got a lot of attendees today that have kind of asked us preliminary, hey, we're looking at this. We're kind of debating on some things. Microsoft came out with this CoPilot Lab platform. If you just Google CoPilot Lab, you'd be able to find it. But it really helps kind of both guide you as the end user on your prompting, as well as gives you like a catalog of prompts. It's one of those things of why recreate the wheel. If you have somebody that's running something kind of similar to a query or ask that you want, you can go in and grab templates and guides and things that they have and just use those. One last thing before we turn it over to Q&A. I'm not seeing much in the chat box for it, so I think we should be good. But the security side is definitely where we get the most questions, and it's the hardest to discuss in heavy generality. So the ask that I would tell you guys as subscribers to products like these is if you have the core security concerns, you really try to define what those are. And the first way to do that is to really talk about what data sets you want Copilot to have access to. Because there's nuances or there's different things that need to happen based on what apps and what things you want to connect to Copilot. As an example, if you want to connect dynamic CRM to allow Copilot to kind of work better with a sales team and access that data, there is a little bit of extra work in terms of making sure that the privacy of the data, especially data that contains what's known as PII, personally identifiable information now under like Wisconsin state breach law, those are pieces that are important. So we may say, hey, we want it to exclude certain components of data, but include others. Wisconsin, luckily for us, didn't go crazy and put like email as a PII identifier. So you don't have to like worry about that here in Wisconsin. But if you're doing business, as an example, in California or New York, where those PII laws are different, those are nuances that we really need to talk about and dive into that do kind of matter or move into that play of the security concern side. Another one here from Sebastian. I use ChatGPT and Gemini frequently. Are there any major differences between those and Copilot? Yes and no. I mean, again, Copilot is loosely built on some of the OpenAI platform that ChatGPT uses. The biggest difference in the platforms is the large language models and some of the things on the back end are not created equally, so to speak. So if you look at like the major providers right now of AI products, you've got OpenAI, you've got Microsoft, you've got Google. They're all training their backend APIs differently. And so the results that you can get, the creativity, the productivity of them can vary pretty widely between platforms. We're seeing that gap narrow, like Meta as an example, Facebook, Meta. They've recently done a major investment into AI, both on the generative side as well as large language model data sets. And so I think you'll start to see competitors like that compete faster than what you saw other people attempt to catch up.
It definitely exponentially builds on itself, right? Like the more information that's put into these things, the more it's going to learn and adapt at a quicker rate too.
Another question from Sebastian, can Copilot use cameras as well? I've never had it try to do anything with video, but your example here, I've used ChatGPT to transcribe handwritten poster into a file. Yeah, you could take a picture, upload that into Copilot and say, hey, turn this into a document, and it'll take that text and move it over into a Word doc, an Excel sheet. Like again, whatever you would prompt that to turn that into, it can definitely take a file or a picture of something and make it into something else. And that is all I'm seeing in the Q&A chat. So like I said, we after today, we'll make sure we send out the slide deck. And then we're also going to send out Microsoft's what they call their Copilot Success Kit. And that's got information on that optimization assessment. It's also got information that you can use if you need to take something to your executive team, or vice versa, if you're an executive and need to bring something down to your department heads. It's got some of our presentation today was built off this, but it has that content of how we can go and talk through it with your staffs. And then we'll also I'll talk with Jamie. I don't know how we'll do it, but we'll try to include some of the links that are contained within the deck to like CoPilot labs and some of those really useful resources. We'll try to extrapolate, pull those out, and throw those somewhere separate so they're a little bit easier to find. Everybody, we appreciate your time today. If you think of anything that you're too scared to ask here in the chat or didn't want to throw out for everybody to see, feel free to get in touch with us. We appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.